Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Reputation Igniter podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, write a review if you feel so inclined. We always appreciate you guys sharing and engaging with the platform here. Today, I'm really excited. We've got Julian Scadden on, and he's from Nextdoor, and he's going to blow your mind. Thank you for being on, Julian. We so appreciate you.
A way to set me up, and everything after this will just go downhill. But thank you. I appreciate it. I've watched some of your previous episodes. I think you have some real heavy hitters, or I know that you have some real heavy hitters based on who you've had before me. So let's see where this goes. Hopefully, I can make the public release if I can add enough value.
Awesome. Thanks, Julian. I appreciate it. Well, they always say in marketing, you got to have the hook right at the beginning to keep them watching, right? So they'll be watching all the way to the end and they'll find nothing of value here. No,
No,
just kidding, you guys.
by the end of this video, I guarantee by the end of this podcast, by the end of this video, not only will Chris give you some helpful information on how to be a reputation igniter, but also by the end of this, you're going to be a more profitable, growth-minded business leader if you so choose, but you got to stay tuned.
There we go. Now we got all the hashtags. My editing team is going to love it. So,
oh, really?
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it, Julian. So guys, as you know, maybe this is the first time you're tuning in, maybe you've been tuning in for a while. The whole goal of this podcast is for you, the HVAC owner. We're just trying to give you some insights, some wisdom, things that maybe you haven't heard or maybe you've heard before that you're just going to hear in a little bit different way. Like Julian said, we like to bring on the heavy hitters, the leaders in our industry, but also more importantly, and this is what really drives this podcast, is having you guys on here. We like to hear your stories. We like to hear your zone of genius, right? So just realize that anybody that's been on the show has been referred to me by somebody in my network. So they have been vouched for by somebody. So if you complain and, have issues with them, I will bring that up with the person who referred them, of course, just to kind of keep it good and in the family. But the real goal here is realizing that you guys are out there doing some incredible, amazing things inside of our communities. And, first you're trying to serve the community. Second, you're trying to, provide a living wage for all of your employees. And then lastly, you're also trying to provide for your family, put food on the table. And in a world where for some reason the mainstream media continues to demonize the entrepreneur for God knows what reason, this is just a way to kind of tell you that we appreciate you. We love what you guys are doing. We want to advocate for you. We want you to do more of it. And so we are trying to equip you with better ways to kind of do that. So with that, that is why I brought Julian on, because we're going to talk about some really cool things. Some that might not sound sexy, but I think are going to be very interesting to you, talking about KPIs. I think maybe you've heard that, maybe you run your business by it, but I think Julian's got a take on it that's going to be really powerful for you. And then the other one is talking about leadership development and succession, which I think is so important, especially if you are listening and you're a baby boomer. The question is, what's happening next for you, right? So with that, Julian, if you wouldn't mind, let's just start here first. I like to understand, hey, how did somebody get into the trades, right? Specifically HVAC, right? And then how did you get Reader's Digest version? Maybe I'm dating myself when I refer to that thing. I don't even know if that thing exists anymore. I think I saw it the other day, actually, at a supermarket. So maybe it's still there. But in maybe 5 minutes, just give us a kind of a here to there. And what are you doing now? And why in the world are you doing it?
Right on. Thank you. Well, I was a guy who did not enjoy school, high school dropout, was actually homeless. So I needed a job and went to an old guy who lived down the street. I knew he had a business. I didn't know what it was. I asked him, just tell me what I need to do. I need to make some money. Well, I was introduced to the trades. Actually, I was handed a shovel. I was part of the sewer ditch digging team. And then I transitioned into a plumbing apprentice. But eventually found my way into the office and learned the business I was working for was being acquired at the time. And the service manager was a nice guy. And he said, Julian, you're a great kid, but you're really slow in the field and they're going to fire you because you're not generating revenue. You're still an apprentice, but I think you're a smart guy. Come in and learn the business. That ended up being one of the greatest blessings of my life. I went in and I learned, and he used to have me run his reports. And I thought that he was just a lazy service manager. But what he was doing is he was teaching me the numbers to watch in the service departments. So I would run his reports and he would ask me who's highest, who's lowest, what numbers, what percentage of this is that. And he would make me do, you might not know about this anymore either, gang, but he made me do long division with a pencil. He would literally make me figure out percentages through division. And I hated him for it because I was a school dropout. Remember that. That's why I left. I just want to work and earn money. But that transitioned into the ability for me to start leading departments in that business. Eventually, I went and worked for another company that invested more learning into me. They were a member of this group called Nextdoor Network. That's how I became aware of Nextdoor Network so early in my career. And then I had a lifestyle change where I wanted to leave my home state. I went to another state. I started a business. And I decided that Nextdoor was so great for the company I had worked for before. I wanted to enlist them as consultants to help me grow this business. And as I did, we successfully grew that business. I exited from it, and I had a choice. And I want you all to think about this. I heard this once, and a consultant told me, "You're leaving your business one way or another." So I don't care if you're young right now and you're thinking that this
Hmm.
is just for the boomers. You're leaving your business one way or another. And then I said, "Well, it's not for some time yet." He said, "Julian, it could be in a box tomorrow." I, well, whoa, whoa, that was extreme. Thanks, buddy. But it made me think about it, that you should be thinking about your exit before you walk in the door.
Mm,
And so with that, we started this business. And when I left, I said, "Do I want to start another business?" I did it. I was successful. It was great.
mm.
I didn't. I didn't like all the liabilities. I didn't like being on call 24/7. I'm just going to be direct, which is why my heart goes out to all of you that choose to contribute back to the community, who choose to love on all those employees. Like Chris said, you have a lot of responsibility and very few people who want to hear your sob story, because everybody thinks you're rich. They think you're this jet setter doing all the things, and little do they know you're just getting by. But you can do better, and you will do better. After that, I left the business and I decided I want to work for Nexstar. Like, that was a pretty cool job. They would call me,
Yeah.
they would point out all my warts, they would tell me where the remedy was. And if I took actions, things worked out. I said, that seems like a pretty cool lifestyle. So I joined Nexstar 11 years ago as a coach. Then I had the privilege of leading the training team with another individual. And then I became the VP because Nexstar started growing. And then 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to throw my hat in the ring as president and CEO of Nexstar Network, which is where I sit today. So I sit in front of you all today as the president and CEO of Nexstar Network. It is a member owned organization focused on taking the world's best tradespeople and helping them become the world's best business people. And that's what we do. More than 5 minutes,
Love
I
it.
think, but there you are.
Love it. Hey, it's all good. It's hard to contain that much awesomeness into 5 short minutes. So, thank you for sharing, Julian. That's exciting. I mean, obviously, I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate. And I'm sure, one of my mentors, he always says, if you aren't constantly doubting your decision to be an entrepreneur, to be an owner on a regular basis, you're probably doing it wrong. Right. So it's like, it
Yep.
means that like somehow you've detached, disconnected or whatever. Right. So, it doesn't really matter what business you're in. I think there's always that thing of like, man, wouldn't it just be easier to just show up at a certain time and leave at a certain time and not think about stuff, not worry about payroll at 3 a.m. in the morning, right? When your stomach's turning.
I'll tell you,
So,
let me tell you the daydream I had on my drive in just today. And I love this place. I don't want to leave this
yeah.
place. They're going to have to drag me out of this place. I love this place. But in that split moment, I was driving in, and yes, there were some heavy conversations that I know I was coming into today, and the burden of leadership, which is also a privilege. But there's
Wow.
a guy driving like the hotel shuttle bus, and I was like, how easy is his life? Like, I just looked at him, and I was like, I would be a great employee. And then I got about halfway through that daydream, and I realized, no, I wouldn't, because I would see all the inefficiencies, I would see all the opportunities, and I would not be a good shuttle driver because I wouldn't be pleased with just that. So you, the leaders, the entrepreneurs, the people that make it happen, follow your dreams, man. Follow that voice in your head, because you're
Yeah.
doing great stuff. We're here to tell you that.
Yeah. Love it, man. Love it. Yeah. That was a constant like thought on every time I was on one of my 9-month deployments is like, man, if I work for McDonald's and I make minimum wage, I'd actually make more per hour, than I am here. And I
Start.
get to go home and sleep in an actual comfortable bed that wasn't the size of my shoulders, being a 6'2" guy trying to,
Yeah.
huddle into one of those racks, it wasn't an easy deal. So, but that's not why people, signed up to listen to our war story. So Julian, let's jump into this, man. You brought up, like, as we were talking earlier, right? This idea of KPIs, they're
Yeah.
important, right? You'd kind of give me some numbers around which KPI, like what KPIs or how many KPIs you should do. Let's peel that back. You said the important thing is to know what are you watching and why are you watching it. Why is that an important question to be asking yourself, and how have you sort of dealt with that question in the past?
Yeah. So I think about this term, lagging and leading indicators. And for a long time, it's a common for business owners to run their business off of lagging indicators. So let's talk for a moment. Let's define those. A lagging indicator is something that you can only find after it's happened. For example, your financial statements. And that's where I really like to live. If you look at your financial statements, they're a snapshot in time, especially the P&L or income statement, and you're looking backwards. You're seeing what happened last month. And the first thing of running a great business is you need to ensure that you have timely and accurate financial statements. You should have your income statement, your P&L, no later than, I would say, worst case, 15. the 15th of the next month. So that way you can make quicker decisions. So that's a lagging indicator. It already happened. You're looking at it. And so that's the beginning of what are you looking at? And then we'll get into that in just a moment. But a leading indicator, our salespeople are really good at leading indicators, because those are the things like, how many phone calls do I have to make to get an appointment? Out of those appointments, how many actually schedule? And of that, how many actually close? So those are some leading indicators, knowing how many calls you have to make. So in your business, we won't get into too much depth here. There's a host of brilliant people out there that can help you dig in. But my thinking coming into this time with you, Chris, was to really introduce concepts, not really drilling all the way down into the tactics, but just to open the thinking in an area. And by the end of this video, I'm sure you'll find at least one area where you want to go find more details specific to your business. And I'm telling you, just find one thing to take away from this. Don't try to do it all. So what are you watching and why? So the why is the next thing. I can't tell you the number of people that, as I might start a coaching conversation, are you receiving your financials? Yes. Are you receiving them by the 12th? Yes. Are they accurate? Yes, I believe they are. What are you doing with that? It's collecting dust, or yeah, they sit on my desk. Okay, well, what did you see in there? What caught your eye? And so here's one more. I guess this is a little bit tactical or specific. When you look at your P&L, look at everything underneath the revenue line as a percentage of revenue. So you want to see your materials, your labor, all of the cost of goods to sell, but also your overheads. Get used to looking at them as a percentage. And here's why. Your businesses are poised for growth right now. And I believe that every one of you, if you just do the specific blocking and tackling that make this industry great, you can and you will grow. I'm seeing it right now in abundance happening. But here's the issue. I've lived this myself. As the dollars become bigger, if it's a way that you've never lived, like let's just say you're a high school dropout who was homeless, and you start seeing numbers like 10 million, and then you start to see things not as a percentage, and you see like $500,000 going to something, and you're like, $500,000 could buy a house. What am I doing right now? Or you can look and say, okay, it's X percentage of revenue. So just get used to looking at percentages for benchmark health. And that way you don't get overwhelmed by the numbers. And even to this day, even in Nexstar, at times working with our team or staff, they'll bring me something and they'll say, hey, Julian, we want to do this thing. It's going to be 20,000 to do it. And I'll say, what percentage of your budget is that? Is it in your budget? What percentage is it? And just helping people reframe to where they should look and why, versus getting caught up in the number itself. So I'll pause there. And what does that create for you, Chris? What thoughts?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Julian. So what I'm kind of thinking of, first of all, I think that's a great way. Cause like if there was, something that had a lot of emotional ties to it, it's always money, right? Like
Exactly.
people bring so much baggage. It's all sorts of baggage, right? I actually had a call with a client, earlier this week, talking about, it's like, hey, I've just never paid that much for that thing, right? It's like, well, this is what growth looks like, by the way. The numbers of what you're spending on certain things, they're going to continue to increase if you're going to grow and you're going to increase, right? So maybe, Julian, if you could highlight maybe a couple of those KPIs in terms of percentages and what healthy ones are, like maybe what you think are the big ones that somebody should just, because I think, people go, yeah, that's great. I'm so fired up, Julian. I'm going to go back. I'm going to look at this. I'm going to make percentages, right? But like, if they don't have a barometer to kind of go, and
Right.
I mean, obviously, I guess this could be a shameless plug for Nexstar or any coaching program really, but like they go back and they look at the number and it's bigger, it's smaller, whatever, right? They should obviously engage with somebody or someone, whether it's a mentor or it's a coach or whatever, to kind of adjust that. So number one, what are some of the important KPIs that they should look at, and what should theoretically maybe a percentage range be for that? And then I forgot my second question on that one. So maybe you just jump into that and then
Yeah.
I'll come up with a second.
Okay, let's start there. So there's, what I think it's helpful if I also frame this just for clarity.
Yeah.
All I know, and what I know really well, and what Nexstar teaches and preaches on, is residential service. Okay. So
Right.
these numbers could change or fluctuate with commercial, industrial, new construction. I don't know about those things. We love residential because you get paid when the job is done. It's a great cash flow business. You can
Sure.
build in reoccurring revenue. So it's just a great business model. So I just want to start there. But relative to residential service, regardless of the trade, and I know we're focused on HVAC, and there's even some nuance between install and service. So, and the other things such as, all right, whether you call them tune-ups or maintenance or whatever you call them. But, you're going to look at your advertising. because you are residential services. So you want to think about what percentage of your revenue is going towards advertising. Again, keep that in mind as a percentage. I've seen it as aggressive as 12%, which is high, but there
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
reasons why you go that high. I've seen it as low as 2 to 4%. And again, there can be things that you're leveraging or using to get you that low in that area. So, I kind of hate, the answer of it depends, but it always depends. What's your growth strategy? What's your capital that's available to you? What's your market penetration? Things of that nature. So advertising is one thing. The other thing is vehicle. And within
Hmm.
vehicle is fuel. So you got to
Yeah.
think about that. You're going to have people on the roads. You always have to watch your vehicle. Then from there, you always need to watch your labor and your materials as the other things to watch. And I would offer that if you just watch those things, just start there, and you
Yeah.
can get them into reasonable percentages, which I am going to resist the urge of going into too deeply, because there
Sure.
is some nuance relative to service, install, regionality. They're not by much though, not by much. I could tell you, I want to do this safely and carefully, not to set off alarm bells either.
Sure.
But as you think about, materials, and you think about service, you're going to relatively be, maybe in the high teens, 20% range. You think about labor, you might be in a high teens, low 20 range. And I think it's pretty obvious that as we start to talk about install though, and you think about materials, those are going to be taking up more. And then your labor should be a little bit less. So, with your materials, you could be 30, maybe into your 30%. Certain situations could become a little bit more extreme. And then your labor should be relatively less, closer more to the teens. So these are just some quick starters. I'm a little rusty though on like the vehicle expenses, so I'm going to avoid
Sure.
that one, because I don't recall. I'll tell you the business that I went to start. I relocated to Atlanta, Georgia. I had never lived there before, and just the fuel costs. First, I was consulting a business out there, and that's how I learned how great the opportunity was out there. But I'm
Mhm.
going here to make a point. Is I was consulting the guy over the phone at the time. I was living in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm looking at the south, and I go, "Oh, it's all wide open, so it must be easy." I didn't know the traffic is what it was. So I'm looking over his P&L, and I said, "Oh, okay. The first thing you're going to do is," and I thought I was really smart, and so here's how I said it. I said, "Have one of your no, probably have one of your part runners in a car that nobody else knows. Go sit at the gas station closest to your shop, sit there and tell me how much fuel, how many sisters, cousins, brothers that they're filling up fuel with." Because when I saw their percentage of fuel, I go, clearly theft is happening, right? Well, here's what he didn't tell me. Here's what I didn't know. They were fueling up in a northern suburb and doing all their work in the heart of Atlanta.
Ah,
Yeah, they weren't stealing at all. This guy just had a poor business model and was just leaking money solely in fuel and maintenance costs for his vehicles. So it's good to know those numbers. So it's like, it's what am I
yeah.
watching? That's why you should watch it, because you got people on the road all the time. But then it turns into that, now what? What am I going to do with it? So we got into the exploration. We learned. We had the conversation about, well, why is your shop in the north if you've been doing business in the city all these times? Well, it's right next to my house, boy. Makes it easy. Nice country boy. Just, hey, boy, it's right by my house. All right, let's dig into that and what you want versus what the business needs. And that's a whole nother conversation for leaders out there. I'll pause again.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? So, love it. And thanks for giving us some good ones to kind of look at and to kind of evaluate. Because yeah, I think it's so critical that we have an idea of what it is. And I think maybe you can talk to this part of this, part of it, and then we'll kind of move on to the leadership piece. It's like, uh, any recommendations or suggestions about how to get unemotional about it, right? Like, I know there's things in my business that I don't like looking at, right? Just
Yeah.
because if you look at them and they're not what they should be, right, that causes or that necessitates change or action or decision, right? So,
Mhm.
in this situation, right, I think it's easy to feel like, hey, things, revenue looks good, right? And you can always look at that top line number and not really, kind of trace it all the way down to the bottom line. And so a lot of, like you said, there can be, succubuses or leeches or whatever you want to kind of say it, like, eating up a lot of that profit if you're not looking at it. So
Yeah.
is there anything you do or you suggest, or maybe your coaches suggest to kind of like help people with the mindset, the shift, or, I've been reading a book lately and it's just talking about like, hey, that there's no emotional attachment to it. You're the one that's putting the emotional piece on it, right? It's just facts, and you just gotta work through it, kind of thing, like the whole straight line leadership principles. But for
Yeah.
you, man, anything you found that have been helpful for some of these business owners to just face the music, right? I guess, in that case.
Thank you. First, I'll share a belief and then I'll share some tactics.
Perfect.
So I find it very interesting. The world is made up of a bunch of different people, and yet we prescribe and try to tell other people how to think or feel.
Sure.
And I'm
Yeah.
about to do that too. So here we go. My belief is I think there's a lot, well, this is based on research and personal exploration, but I think one of the most misunderstood things is Zen. Now,
Mm,
Stoicism is different and Zen is
sure.
different. But people
Oh,
say, oh, to be Zen is peaceful, to be Zen is that. No, actually, what Zen is to be present in the moment. So this is going somewhere, I promise you. If you get emotional when you look at that, and you know you're going to get emotional when you look at something, just do it in the privacy of your own home and be emotional. Be in the moment.
yeah.
Yell, cut, spit, kick, do what you need to do. Seriously, do it.
Yeah.
If you know that's how you're going to react, stop trying to change your stripes because you're
Yeah.
going to spend more time trying to be who you're not versus how am I showing up and what's healthy for the organization. So myself, as you're probably picking up, I'm an emotional person. I really am. I'm driven off emotion and
Hmm.
passion. I do have logic capabilities, and I think I was blessed with just some strategic gifts. But the reality is, when things hit me and they hit me quick, I have an emotional reaction. So I do my best that if it's happening in front of people, I have little triggers and tactics. So some of the things that I'll do, and this again, just personal, and you can find what
Yeah.
works for you. I get curious. If I find something like
Mm,
I immediately disagree or I think it's wrong, and I learned this from harming relationships by just jumping on it or being emotional. So I just go, well, tell me how you arrived there. Okay, so then what happens next? And I literally just have this, just keep asking questions as I can feel my emotions coming down. I've even leveraged this. I'm going to get really personal here for just a moment. I've even found this in dealing, with just racial situations and
mm,
just asking people, well, that's curious, tell me where that comes from or tell me more about that. And instantly I find myself shifting from a place of what could be anger or even like defensiveness. And but you have to be sincere. You have to be naturally curious. I had this happen
sure.
with somebody once that said something really that could be, perceived as offensive, especially in today's society. It could be a whole uproar. And it
Sure.
hit me when they said it. It hit me. It was very personal. It felt like a personal attack. And I just go, well, that's interesting. Where's that question come from? And guess what happened? What he
Yeah.
told me next educated me. I started to
Mm,
learn more about his background, and I heard something in the question after he explained how he thought and where it came from that I didn't hear in the question the first time he said it. And it was
mm,
wow. So I would just encourage you, if you find yourself in emotional states or if you know you're going to be in an emotional situation, give yourself some padding. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you weak
yeah.
to say, you know what, send me the financials and we'll meet, send them to me by 9 and we'll meet at 10. Nobody has to
Yeah.
know that you're crying in your office for an hour or whatever it is you have to do to cope with it. And here's the other thing I'll say about emotions, because of working and dealing with thousands of people. If you think you're good at it, you're exactly the one that needs to slow down because you're probably the one that's just reacting so quickly and people acquiesce to it because you're the senior leader. So just,
Yeah.
I'm fine, or that's just how I am, stuff like that. Again, guys, that is how I am, but that doesn't mean that's what's best for the business. So I create spaces, places, or tools such as to get hyper curious, and those help me coast in. So there's a few quick thoughts on that question.
That's awesome. I love it. Like you said, spaces, places, or tools. I think it's important to just kind of realize that, yeah, maybe it's not best to do that at your desk at 7 in the morning, right before you walk into the team meeting, and start throwing stuff around,
You
because
know,
maybe
Chris,
somebody typed something into a spreadsheet wrong, right?
I'm going to
Things
jump on
might
you.
be okay.
I'm intentionally going to jump on you right there. I
Yeah,
have, in a moment, just paused and said, I need to reflect and review this. Can we please, continue this at another time?
yeah,
Because I can sense a very extreme, self-righteous reaction coming. And I just know I don't have all the information and I know where I'm at and I'm not ready to receive new information. It doesn't happen a lot, but if it is
yeah.
that extreme, I love where you were going there. I just wanted to add on there. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, of course. All right, man. So let's jump into it. Second half of the recording here. Leadership, succession, development, and then I love what you were kind of talking at the beginning, is like making sure that you have, you're going to exit your business one way or another, whether it's like, either in a box, right, or you're going to do it, on your terms as you like, right? What do you think is important in today's day and age, especially with Gen Z, infiltrating the business, if you want to kind of call it that or whatever, right? But this new generation coming up with this big sense of why and purpose and all that kind of stuff. What how do you think it's important to bake in the leadership development and then also have a clear succession plan? Because I think that's the other thing that my generation kind of, maybe lacks is follow through, right? So how do you make sure that you're not either, overextending yourself, overexposing yourself, but at the same time you are cultivating these leaders that you not just want, but you need in your business to make sure that, what you're creating has some sort of a legacy, right? And it's not that you want it on a tombstone somewhere etched in stone,
Right.
but just the fact that like all the things you are putting your time, your energy, your blood, your sweat, your tears into actually stands beyond, your tenure in it.
Great. Thank you. So let's keep in mind that the perspective I'm speaking from and to is the senior most leader in the organization.
Right.
So you've heard me say this a couple times. I'm going to keep repeating it, and I'm going to say it again right now. The leader the business needs versus the leader that you want to be. There's a lot of things, and look, I'm guilty of it too, gang. Trust me. Everything I share here is from the scars that I've earned, and we're doing our best to help you avoid, because you'll get your own. And you get your own. So just
Sure.
learn from some of ours. But the owner that the business needs. So first, I'll just start there. When you're a beginning business, your revenue is 1 million or under. Yeah, you're probably the call taker, the warranty guy, the return person, the deal maker, the baker, all that stuff. I get it. And that's who you need to be at that stage of the business. But as your business starts to grow, and kind of where we started this conversation is, then you have to become a business person, my friend. You do. And the first way, the easiest way, which is why I started there, very literally with you, I started there. I have bigger, broader thoughts, but let's just give you some tactical and specific strategies to think about first. Then you need to start knowing KPIs and metrics. You actually have to start knowing the health benchmarks of your business. And so I talked a little bit about the service and install side, but it's also things like employee retention. It's also the things like the time to hire. It's are the right people in the right seats. It's employee engagement surveys. As your business starts to grow, these are the things. So there's metrics in every area of your business. If you don't believe that, again, reach out to any coaching or consulting organization or individual, or even some of your peers will have some of these numbers. Look to those who are a little bit ahead of you. That's what Nexstar was all about. Is it's about people helping people, and we get to listen in, really eavesdrop on those conversations and really regurgitate the great things we hear. I'm not going to pretend like we're the smartest people in the room. The only reason that we are at times is because of the company we keep. So reach out to peers also, but look for metrics in every department of your organization. Everything, your AR, your AP, just everything should have a metric and KPI. That's the next stage of maturity. After that becomes team building. You need to become a team builder. So not only are you putting the right people in the right leadership seats with the metrics to watch, and I have a good friend that I go round and round with this on. He believes that people development comes before the operations. I strongly disagree, because I've coached sports, I've run businesses, and I can have a lot of people loving me and they're just hyper busy doing the wrong things. First, you have to give them the scorecard. What is winning and losing look like? And that's the metrics. We have to understand the business, what winning and losing looks like. And then we can say, what are the activities or behaviors that contribute to that? And listen closely to what I said, activities and behaviors. I have seen hard driving leaders gain results and burn through people. If you're going to have an enduring business that will be here for a while, you're going to hit certain revenue milestones where that leakage of people will become more extreme and something that you cannot overcome. So just early on, actions and behaviors. Once you get past building the leadership phase, then you can start to put your eyes on the legacy phase of what will this business be next. No, I'm not offering that at any point in this development you can always be acquired or release or lose the business. You can. What I'm giving you is an optimal progression so you can maximize the value of what you've built. If you have, and I think this is probably common knowledge in our day and age, as quickly as acquisitions are happening and the investment money that's coming into the industry. But first, we don't want to buy a busy business. The first one I talked about, where the owner's running around doing everything, that's not very valuable. Once you know the KPIs and metrics, you can have the footing to understand the value of your business. Now, once you have a leadership team, they're no longer buying you, they're buying a brand and a repeatable process per se with the business. So by the time you're in legacy mode, you can command your price, you can call your exit shot, you can get what you want. But this is all how you're showing up. And here's something I want to offer. I have seen too many times successful businesses put the owner in a position where he becomes a remote or absentee owner or leader. Impossible in home services.
Mhm.
Impossible in home services. And I mean that. Some will disagree with me, and that's okay. We're not going to do it here on Chris's podcast, but I'll create my position since I have the floor. There are even some consultants that will say, turnkey business that you can run from a remote location. Every time I see that, it eventually dissolves. You have to have an operator on site. I'm not saying you can't be remote, but I'm saying there needs to be a physical leader that people are looking at every day and looking to every day. And if you're going to be the pop in, drop in owner from time to time, keep all conversations between you and that leader, and everything else you say to staff is all rah, rah, and great job. Stay out of everybody else's way. You've got to let that leader lead. We need a leader in person. And you know this from your service, Chris. We
Yeah.
respect the general, we follow the sergeant. Okay, so here's another way
Yeah.
that I like to say it. Everyone's looking at you as, and this is as your business grows, and not everyone's reporting to you anymore. Everyone is looking at you. They're looking at you, but they're following their manager. So we're looking at how you behave. Do you have a private parking spot up front that's covered and nobody else's is, and you only come in once a week? They're looking at that, and they're also looking at every time you raise the prices. But they're following their manager, because if their manager says, you know what, Julian's actually a great guy. We believe in his vision. He's actually got 5 other businesses. He's entrusted me to run this department, and I thank you that you're helping. And they go, oh, okay. Then they have some context, but they're still going to be watching you, but they will follow their immediate report. So just keep that in mind, that there may be stages where you need to be the owner that the business needs, not what you want. There may be stages where you have to put in an integrator or operator if that's not your strong suit. I even look at Nexstar, which is a member owned organization. I'm privileged to serve as president and CEO, but the reality is my predecessor left early. He left when we all were still following him. We knew he still had more in the tank. And he said something to me very clever that I hope I have the ability to execute in the way he did. He said, Julian, it's just like athletes. It's better to leave a year early than a year late. And truer words just really hit me in the heart. So I hope I have the wisdom and the awareness that I can understand what Nexstar needs when I've gotten it to the place to the best of my abilities, and recognizing that it needs a new leader or new leadership or just even new thinking or new energy, whatever it
Yeah.
is. Think about, the business is your asset. It is not yours, because one way or another you will leave it. So what does the business need? Where do you fit into that? Stop looking down at everyone else and saying, where do they fit in? Constantly start in the mirror. Am I being who the business needs today? And then you can press forward. Got a little long-winded, a little bit righteous on that one, but thank you for letting me dig into that a little bit deeper.
Oh, that's powerful. I really can't touch what you just delivered there. I mean, I think it's so important. And I think the other thing too, right? Like because we see so many of these people who are, remote business owners, or we see it in other professions, right? I think the desire for something like that, looking like, man, that would be awesome, hands off this, that, and the other thing. But like you said, there's a time and a place for that. It can work, but you have to make sure that you really have somebody strong in place in that leadership position,
It can, it can
so
work,
that you
and
can
it
do it.
can. I've just seen it
Yeah.
done wrong too many times, and there's a timing for it. There's a timing, there's revenue levels for it by which and when. So guess what? You don't get to do it tomorrow if you're at 2 million. Sorry,
Yeah.
you don't get to hire somebody. You don't get to abdicate. You've got to do the sweat, the muscle work, and get to that position. And I know you can.
Yeah, I mean, I've being in the industry and seeing businesses from the marketing side for over a decade, right? I've seen a lot of owners who try to abdicate that position way too early, and I watch their businesses just stagnate, like
You
you're
nailed it.
saying, and deteriorate, right? So it's like it, to
Let, let,
think that it's something that like can't be seen or can't be sensed is you're deluding yourself, right? It definitely can be
let's
from
talk a
the
little bit about
outside.
the drug, the danger in that, just for a moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because here's what happens. They abdicate, someone else fails, they come back, and then it gets back on. And then they feel like the hero without taking a moment to realize they created. You don't get to be a hero for putting out the fire you started. And I'm going to say
Right.
that very directly to your faces right now, ladies and gentlemen. You do not get to be the hero for extinguishing the fire you created. So just be careful, because you'll run back in, you'll get it back going because it's your baby and nobody cares about it as much as you. Yeah, we get that. But how did you get in that position in the first place? You abdicated, and we can't have that. Thanks for letting me jump back in on that one.
Yeah, and the last thing I would add to that is like I think it's easy to, like you said, be like, no, now is the time, and timing is so important for this, but just making sure that when you're doing that, that you do have a plan, I would imagine it's a couple of years, depends on the situation where your business is at, right? But don't take it out too early, right? To your point, because I think sometimes you might come out 6 months or a year early, when if you had just pushed through another 6 months or done another year, you'd have really set up everybody for success. And you also have to understand that people do want to take on that leadership position if you've got the right people in the right seats, right? So like you're also in a way creating opportunity for other people. So it is a very, positive and powerful thing if done right and not taken as a drug and something to just, kind of jump early. So appreciate that. So Julian, as we're kind of wrapping up here, if you could just touch on real quick the idea of how does one set themselves up for succession, and maybe you can maybe point to something a little bit more than, you got to make sure that you're not in the daily operations, that you get this to that, like, if there's something insightful that would be helpful that isn't sort of the regular sort of humdrum, droll that you're hear from a lot of these, succession planner people. Is there any insight or nugget there that you think would be worth sharing?
Yeah, probably, but I'm going to share where my brain went when I heard
Perfect.
you.
Yeah.
Heard you. And there was a gentleman that I had the privilege of working alongside here at Nexstar, and he had a really good business, a growing business, and then he sold it. And I said, "Wow, it seemed like you guys were really getting you're getting up there to the point, and there might have even been more money left on the table." And he said, "Julian, I built this business knowing that I would sell it in 22 years." Like this guy was so specific. He said, "I knew when I started it, I would sell it in 22 years. And that's why I never let my children work in it because I knew I was going to sell it and I didn't want,
Hmm.
them to go through that. I didn't let family work in it. He treated everything. So I also want to say, for all the things that I've shared, I don't want to come across as this is pie in the sky and we ought to be friends and get along. Here's what I sincerely believe in business. If you tell me the truth about where you're coming from and then your actions and behaviors match your words, I'll believe you and I'm cool with you. I don't have to align with you. I may not agree with you, but I will definitely respect you. So some of you may say, you know what, Julian, I want to get to, 2 million in EBITDA and I want to get a multiple of 7 times. And if I can achieve that, I'm out. And it's just math and it's just numbers and however soon I can achieve that because he actually beat his 22-year goal by 2 years. And he just said, Julian, there were other financial markers I was looking at. And when I saw those, that's it. That was my plan. There's going to be other people who think about succession relative to a family member or an employee handoff or just other ways of thinking about it. So I really just when I think about succession and successful succession, I think people wait until they get a diagnosis from their doctor that they're ill before they start estate planning, when the
Yeah.
reality is start estate planning as soon as you start accumulating assets. Said differently, when you open a business, think about how you want to exit. That's when succession planning should begin. What I've seen from thoughtful successions that are not acquisitions are really about a 2-year time frame, and you got to let go. So that's the other thing about a successful exit. You got to go. Some of this, and we touched on this a little bit earlier too. But we're
Mhm.
still going to pay him a little. He comes around. He comes in the office. He still runs permits. That's getting into the culture a little bit, but that's tough.
Yeah.
But I would say, identify your financial markers. In my opinion, like I love the people, I really do, but you created this thing. You put in the blood, sweat, and tears. You missed the kids' games. You argued with your spouse over this. All this stuff happened. So what is the number that you're really looking for and achieve? And honestly, once you have that number in the direction, you will actually get to it a lot faster when you write it down, you look at it, you know it, you own it. Then you can start having conversations with your senior leadership team and as you start getting closer to that goal, say, hey, gang, here's what I'm thinking. And there's a few options. Maybe I'm going to think about an employee sale or a transition to one of you all. You might get to a size where it can't even make sense financially to hand off to another person.
Yeah.
You have to go and get acquired. Similarly, there, you're going to have options to think about, and you can be enticed to stay on and operate the business with money that'll roll forward. Or you can, it's almost like the lottery will give you less if you leave because to the acquirer, it's hard now because now they have to bring in a new leader. But
Yeah.
you can leverage that by having a great leader in place, maybe start to remove yourself and show that you are not the reason why the business is doing great. So I bounced around a little bit there, but there's some things there
Mhm.
that I would encourage people to start thinking about and then dig deeper into.
Love it. Love it. Well, I appreciate it, Julian. So I'm going to ask one question that I always ask my guests at the end of the podcast. So,
Right on.
um, obviously we kind of communicated, we scheduled time, wanted to bring you on. What is the one question that you wish I had asked, or that you'd hoped I had asked, that, as you're coming on, I think there's always that initial sort of excitement of like, oh man, I'd love to share about this, or I hope we get to touch on this. What, if I could ask you that question, what is that question? And then I'd like your response.
I think where my mind went
Hmm.
in this moment is I I'm trying to jeopardize this thing, meaning Jeopardy, and put it in the form of a question. Julian, what would you say to people who, aren't running to join the trades?
Mm,
And, because we hear this, we hear about, that new people are not joining as technicians. I haven't heard it as much lately, but there used to be this thing that was called the gray tsunami. You touched on it earlier, meaning all the boomers were starting to retire. So they
yeah.
called it a gray tsunami of retirement. There were so many people retiring at once. And then I hear people talk about, young people don't want to work hard and they don't want to get into the trade. And as you can tell by the tone of my voice, I don't have time for that. I just
Yeah.
don't have time for it. I left I exited my business, maybe it was way back in like 2011.
Okay.
And guess what was a really big deal for me back then? I couldn't find enough good technicians.
Yeah.
And guess what is going on in 2024? I can't find enough good stop it. Stop looking to your legislation to legislate people joining the trade. Stop looking for some marketing strategy to make it sexy and then everybody's going to come running. What do you
Yeah.
have the span of control over? And what you have the span of control over is creating your own apprentice programs. And I really think if you're not building your future workforce in-house as well as developing your leadership team, so I think these two things get separated. I
Yeah.
think at times we look at, develop your leadership team, and then sometimes we talk about acquiring a larger workforce. Well, you have to build an in-house workforce. I strongly believe that and see that in residential service for sure. If you don't have some form of an apprentice program, and guess what? There's metrics in that too of how many people should you gain, how many people should you actually retain, how long should the program be? And we have great members who would be, well, you know what? Our members in Nexstar are so great that if you, a non-member, call them and say, Julian was talking on this podcast, you're a competitor in my area. Would you be willing to talk to me about some things while I get on my feet? I'm an emerging business. I want to learn. I can tell you 99.9% of our members will say, hey, yeah, let's meet for coffee. And they'll talk
Yeah.
and they'll just tell you about it. So I just think you need to build your own workforce. You need to have a plan. And I'm just really, I don't have a lot I don't mean to overplay this, but as
Yeah.
somebody who was homeless, somebody who didn't have a lot of upside, somebody who was in a really, really bad state, like as far as the people I was surrounding myself with and the environment I grew up in, and had every reason to be victimized. I do have a very short fuse for people who find reasons to not get things done. And so I would just encourage you to, now you've been educated. Maybe before
Yeah.
today, you really believed in your tax dollars were going to make it happen, or some brilliant marketing person was going to bring them to you. And then you can use today. Just say, today I just had an epiphany and I realized we need to start thinking about apprentices. It makes me nervous. I'm scared. I don't know where to start. Well, start by having a conversation with somebody who's maybe a few steps ahead of you business wise, and just start chipping away. The first step is the most important step. And as my predecessor would always say, first things first, second things never. And all he meant by that is just what's in front of you today, knock it out. The next thing will be there.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you, Julian, so much for being on. Really
Thank you,
appreciate
Chris.
it. If somebody who's listening to this really wants to kind of pick your brain a little bit more, reach out, connect, like what's the best way to sort of approach that? You can share as much contact information as you want, as little as you want. Totally understand everybody's preferences there.
It's all good. Thank you for that safe transition to my recommendation. I will say this: if you've listened to me for this long, you know what you're dealing with. So if you would like to communicate with me, just look up Nexstar Network. Nexstar Network, not Nexstar Media Group. Nexstar Media Group is a conglomerate of cable channels, and every time they take Golden Girls or a game show off the air, we get all their phone calls. So Nexstar Network, serving residential trades. Our website is very clear, and there's only one Julian here. Call the main number there. Look up my email. It's out there. Just hit me up and I'll chat with you. It's all good. And I can be found on LinkedIn as well. And I prefer, if it's professional, let's keep it professional. If you really have the courage to drink a beer and talk crap with me, maybe we can do that too. But let's just start with some professional stuff first.
Awesome. Love it, Julian. Thank you so much for being on. Really do appreciate you, your insight, your wisdom. If you are still listening to us at this point, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of the Reputation Igniter podcast. Again, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you never miss another episode that when we drop it. Write a review for us on any of the podcast platforms that we're on that you appreciate. And my ask is always simply share this podcast or any of our podcasts with just one more HVAC owner so that we can get more of this information, this insight into the hands of our trades. Because for me, and the real genesis impetus for this podcast is that we raise the level of professionalism in our industry such that it is the greatest barrier to entry into our industry. And that's what keeps the looky-loos, the guys who are just going to open up shop, screw a bunch of people over and leave a bad taste in the homeowner's mouth. And then we have to fight through all that drama and baggage to make our sales. So we so appreciate you and looking forward to seeing you next time on the podcast. podcast. Thanks again and take care.